I wonder if you have ever faced a situation that feels just way too big for you. It leaves you feeling overwhelmed, underprepared, perhaps unqualified. You might feel that there is somebody else that is much better qualified to give it a go. And I don't know who might be asking you to fulfill such a task, but you might feel that you can't say no to that person. And if you found yourself in that situation, it can leave you feeling pretty conflicted. You don't want to let people down, but you really don't want to do what they are asking you to do. And that is where we find Moses in today's story. He has had this incredible burning bush experience. He has personally encountered God. I'm sure it's blown his mind. But next comes the big ask. Exodus chapter 3 verse 10, God says to Moses, "So go now. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt." It's time to face Pharaoh. Just want us to pause there for a second so we can attempt to comprehend the enormity of this task. Pharaoh, who is the almighty leader of the superpower of the day, himself likened to a god. He's probably the most powerful man in the world. Egypt is the most powerful country in the world, a destructive force that can do what it likes to whoever it likes. My people, the people of Israel, enslaved in Egypt by Pharaoh, their slavery and building labour means they're essential to the Egyptians and all that the Egyptians are trying to do. The numbers. We don't have a recorded number, but when Joseph and his family moved to Egypt, there were 70 of them. We're now 430 years later, and we read in chapter 1 they had become exceedingly numerous to the point where Pharaoh was worried. So go now. I am sending you to face Pharaoh, to bring my people out of Egypt. It is a huge ask, and it's a huge task. I don't know how you would have responded, but I think most of us would go down the Moses route and think of all of the reasons straight away why it might not be the best idea to face Pharaoh. I thought it might be helpful for me to share a little bit of my Moses story, if that's okay with you guys. I'm going to take you back to 2017. Mim and I had been married a couple of years. I'd been working my job for 10 years, and we just felt like actually time for something a little bit different. We knew that we wanted to adopt kids, and that was going to be a really important part of what we wanted to do. But having worked the same job for 10 years, I felt like I needed a bit of a break, really, and just wanted to do something a little bit different. We thought about going travelling. We thought about going to live somewhere else for a little while. We loved Bristol. We felt Bristol was our home, but felt like we could, maybe experience something a little bit different. So I quit my job. And then we kind of changed our minds. We kind of thought, actually, travelling isn't really where we feel called to be and what we feel called to do. We feel called to be adoptive parents, and therefore we don't want to go travelling and all the associated costs with that. But that meant I was unemployed. And I don't know if any of you have ever been unemployed, but it's a really kind of tough place to be, actually. A lot of our identity and purpose is in what we do for work. And I felt a little bit, even though I was probably only unemployed for 3.5 months, I felt a little bit in a bit of a desert place, a bit unsure. Didn't really know what I was supposed to do or how I was kind of, gonna be. And then my, I guess you could call it a burning bush experience, came in the form of a call from Tim Dobson. Not quite the Moses sort of situation there, but Tim said to me, "You and Mim aren't going to go away now, you're not going to go travelling." I said, "No, Tim, we've kind of changed our minds, we're going to, see what else lines up." He said, "I'm so pleased." I said, "Oh, thanks, Tim, that's very kind." He said, "Joe," who I mentioned earlier, Joe and Chris, they feel called to Africa, they're going to leave Branch, and we need someone to kind of lead the church there. How would you feel about that?" I said, no thanks. And I went into Moses mode. I could think of all of the reasons. I know, Anne, it's shocking, isn't it?
His interview was dreadful, honestly.
That's my next bit of the story, Anne. I automatically thought of all of the reasons why I didn't want to lead church. And I could think of a lot of reasons. And as Anne said, Tim and Dave and Rob, they kind of said, let's just go through it one step at a time and we'll just see how God leads. And so we did. I had a chat with them and we came to branch and we just did little bits and pieces. And at no point was I convinced. To the point where I was interviewed and Alice was there, I think Dave was there, and being out, she kind of went points west on me and she said, I'm going to stop you there. Do you actually even want this job? And I said to her and Dave and others in the room, I said, I honestly don't know. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if I've got the skills. I don't know if this is the right time. And I was quite open and honest and thought, how externally voiced all the reasons why perhaps I wasn't right. I felt like Moses. I felt like I was ill-equipped for the task at hand. I could think of all of the reasons why it wasn't a good idea and why I wasn't right for the role. But the Bible is full of examples of people who aren't ready, who aren't right, or aren't equipped for the task at hand. The good news for me, and I think it's the good news for us, is that God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called.
Amen.
And I think Moses is perhaps the best example we find in the Bible of this, but it's not the only example by any means. We read in 1 Corinthians, verse 26, brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things, the things that are not, to nullify the things that are. I love that. I love that. But it doesn't stop us thinking of all of the reasons why we shouldn't do what we think God is asking us to do. And some of the reasons Moses kind of said that he didn't want to face Pharaoh. I'm not good at public speaking. I can't do that. What if they don't believe me? I think Moses was around 80 years old. I don't think it says in the Bible that he was 80 and says, I don't want to, and I'm a relatively old man, but he was 80. He felt completely inadequate. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay when we feel inadequate. Because God doesn't argue the point with Moses. He doesn't try and convince him that he is adequate. But what he does is he equips him. Chapter 4 and verse 1. Moses says, but what if they don't believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord never appeared to you? Then the Lord asked him, what is that in your hand? It's a shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Throw it down on the ground, the Lord told him. So Moses threw it down and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, reach out and grab its tail. So Moses reached out and grabbed it and it turned back into the shepherd's staff in his hand. Perform this sign, the Lord told him, then they will believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, really has appeared to you. The snake and the staff. I'm sure we've read about the snake somewhere in the Bible already. It's amazing how God can use something and flip it. God equipped Moses with signs and wonders, things to show that it wasn't about Moses. It wasn't about his gifting or his ability. It was about Yahweh. I am who I am, the actual most powerful being in the entire universe. And that is the case for us too. God still does signs and wonders. David Mitchell, when he was last here with us, shared that one of our distinctives as followers of Jesus is wonders. Signs that show that God is real and that he is who he says he is. On Pentecost Sunday, it seems obvious to remember that the Holy Spirit came in power on his disciples, enabling them to do signs and wonders. Remember that Peter quoted Joel the prophet, "I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will show wonders in the heavens above and signs on the earth below." I wonder for us in this next little season at Branch whether we can press into that a little bit more. See some more of God's signs and wonders. But even with God-given signs and wonders and a staff that turned into a snake, Moses still wasn't convinced. He says in verse 10, "But I'm not eloquent. I'm slow of speech and tongue." And then in verse 13 we get to the crux of it. Please send somebody else to do it. God's response and God's provision was Aaron. He's good at speaking. And what does God say? "I will help both of you and teach both of you what to do." Aaron's role was to support Moses in something that Moses found really difficult, the kind of public speaking bit of it. But actually, Aaron's role was just to support Moses, to be a friend and to be a companion. Leadership can be really lonely, and God doesn't want us to be lonely. He puts people around us, especially when he's asking us to do something for his kingdom. With Branch, I found many Aarons. People who are good at some of the things that I'm not so good at, but people who support me. Companions, friendship. People who share a heart and a vision for God's kingdom coming in our community of Henbury and Braintree, and using his local church to bring community, build community, and show people the love of Jesus. I think we can all find our Aarons. And if you haven't found your Aaron, I want to encourage you to ask God, because he provides. So when God calls us, he equips us with signs and wonders, and he provides people around us. But I think that Moses still needed some convincing to face Pharaoh. It says in chapter 3 verse 11, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" God's response straight away in verse 12, "I will be with you." God equips us. God provides for us. But the biggest game changer for Moses in facing Pharaoh, and I think the biggest game changer for us, is that God is with us. Romans 8, if God is for us, what can be against us? Pharaoh was powerful. God was more powerful. Egypt had people enslaved. God brought freedom. The numbers involved in getting the people of Israel from Egypt out were probably a bit bonkers. God made a way. Whatever the pharaohs that we face in life, we can be sure that God doesn't ask us to do more than we can manage. He equips us and he resources us. And in and through it all, he is with us every step of the way.